B4B TV. Real people, real stories, real Bradford.
Welcome to B4B TV, the platform that shines a light on the real people, the real stories, the real Bradford. Thank you very much for joining us today on a very special occasion. The latest show to come on board with B4B TV is the City of Film show. And this today is the first ever launch episode of the City of Film show. And we have some very special guests today. Well, a co-host, I'd like to present. First of all, my name is Dr. Sohail Ahmed, Chair of Bradford for Better. And we have filmmaker, writer, producer, and co-host, also Bradfordian, Atif Mir Hussain. Welcome, Atif.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
Fine, thank you very much.
Excited, very excited today to be launching this City of Film show. And we have a very special guest today. It's the City of Film show, and we have got Mr. City of Film himself, or should I say, Professor City of Film, Professor David Wilson. Welcome.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. And it's a great honor and pleasure to have you on today. And there's so much to talk about, so much exciting stuff going on in Bradford and as a City of Film. So we're hoping today will be very informative and inspiring for our listeners and viewers out there. So thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So let's start with yourself, David. We shall be asking some questions about your role, talking about the City of Film, what our people in Bradford, the Bradfordians, can anticipate coming up in the near future. And we will also explore some of your film choices. So looking forward to that. So first of all, David, tell us a bit about yourself and your role at City of Film.
Well, I'm a Bradford lad through and through, really. So I was born in Bradford in 1968, St. Luke's Hospital. My parents and my grandparents were all part of the textile industry. Somebody did some work on my family tree, and I think it was my great-great-granddad that first moved to Bradford. He was a farmhand up in Kendal, and they obviously moved here to get work in the mills. And then my dad used to work in the wool sampling room, which used to be at the Wool Exchange. And he used to send wool samples to markets all over the world. And I found out in my later life, I wasn't particularly interested in that as a kid. I found out in my later life that that's the exact same job that J.B. Priestley used to do when he was working in the wool trade. So it was quite interesting. But my background, my mum was a dance teacher as well as working in textiles. She taught dance from a very early age. My granddad was a drummer, a musician, and music has run through my life, really. So before working for City of Film, I was a professional musician for quite a few years. I then did some work with the City Council around music development, and I ended up being cultural programs manager. And then when this City of Film thing came along, I was quite intrigued by it. So I was really interested in trying to get in from the sidelines to see what it was all about. And I remember when Bradford got designated as a City of Film. And then fast forward 2 years from that, the previous director left the post to go on and do another job, and the job was vacant, and I applied, and I was successful, actually. And I think it's transferable skills. I think what I bring actually to the conversation is what I brought back then actually was a real passion for Bradford and the heritage of Bradford and the textile and the film heritage, which actually go hand in hand. And, I didn't know much about the industry. I didn't know the inner workings of the industry back then. I do now, because I've spent 12 years working. I created the film office in 2012. We didn't have a film office. We used to have a version of a film office years ago. So when Bradford joined in 2009, we joined this network of creative cities around the world that UNESCO sort of used as a pilot, really. UNESCO is the United Nations Education, Science and Cultural Organizations. And they wanted to start this network of creative cities to drive sustainable development in cities, to basically make people's life choices in cities better. So better skills, better education, better community development through culture and creativity, which in Bradford's case is film. And that story of film in Bradford goes right back to the dawn of cinema and the early pioneers that actually grew out of the engineering class that was supporting the textile industry. And the more I got into the role, the more I started uncovering all this amazing stuff and all these amazing film and so surely now TV that's been made here. So it is that UNESCO network, to put it into a really succinct way of looking at it, they're trying to find local solutions to global problems. So I'll give you one example. Film education, being able to teach young people how to read and write using film. We created a methodology in Bradford in how to do that, really simple techniques with colleagues from Bradford Council and schools across Bradford. And that methodology has now been adopted by schools in Belfast and Bristol and some of the other UNESCO creative cities. And it's things like that. It's a really simple example, and I could go into more detail if you want. But there's lots of examples like that. And actually what we're trying to do is give creators and filmmakers a voice and also deal with the professional sector. So we deal with all the film and TV inquiries that come into Bradford, and we try and facilitate them wherever possible. Hence, you get Peaky Blinders, The Railway Children, Ali and Eva, Clio Barnard. And the knock-on effect to that is the economy as well. Filmmakers coming and crews coming to Bradford, staying in the hotels, eating in the restaurants. But then you add to that screen tourism as well, that people... There's lots of research that proves that people want to go visit stuff they've seen on TV and stuff they've seen on film. So it's a really exciting place to work, a really, engaging place to work. And there's just not enough hours in a day, really.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
It's always a source of pride to see real Bradfordians, in the job that you're in, because it's very easy, I suppose, for these sort of international organizations to go out and headhunt somebody who's from, I don't know, London, Manchester, Birmingham. But you having that sort of multi-generation link and affiliation to Bradford and the understanding that you bring. I know you studied at Bradford University as well. You've got that whole sort of the way you've grown up, you've understood the academic side of it as well. What strengths do you think that brings, apart from the obvious that, your passion and your understanding of Bradford as a city and the history behind it? What else did that give you?
I think actually, there's an authenticity there, like you say, that I do know Bradford. I know the streets and the locations across Bradford inside out because I've grown up with them. But I also I'd like to think that I know the communities, even some of the new communities that have come to Bradford in the last sort of 5-10 years. We've worked with them through our community cinema partnership, and I think there's a lot for other organisations that have money to invest in film, like the British Film Institute, like the British Council, like UNESCO. Like you say, often people in my role will have come from London or may come from another major city. So I think it's quite unusual to have someone in my position from the actual city. And I think actually, if people reflected on that and put more people from their locality into some of these positions, I think it would be better, generally be better for those cities and for those organisations. Because I can speak from an authentic point of view. If I'm speaking to the BBC or if I'm speaking to the Sudanese community that have populated Bradford recently and fled atrocities in Sudan, I come from a point of view that is quite it's authentic. I suppose I would say I know what I'm talking about when it comes to Bradford and when it comes to Bradford and film. I don't have all the answers by any means. Don't have all the answers, but I think that is a real key strength, actually. Yeah,
absolutely. And you're in a position where you are a global ambassador for Bradford, and it's so natural if you are from Bradford to portray that sort of passion and sense of pride that you have in Bradford as your home city, which, as much as somebody would try if they were from Birmingham, they just won't have that real sort of sense of belonging that you have to Bradford.
It's not the same.
I think that's true, and that has been reflected back to me when I have, I've been quite fortunate in this job to travel. Before the pandemic, I went to China quite a few times. I've been on a judging panel for a film festival in the US. I've been to the Rome Film Festival twice and spoken at the Rome Film Festival. And I'm actually an accredited expert advisor to the UK Commission for UNESCO, on the development of creative cities. And I think that is an endorsement of course, it's me and the way that I've tried to learn and develop my personal career throughout the last 10 years. But, I think it's also, there's so much to say about Bradford as well. There are so many different layers to Bradford. It's like an onion. Once you start to peel away, there's so many things you can say about Bradford. Yeah. And often the perceptions of Bradford are wrongly portrayed, really. And so I'd like to think what I do is to counterbalance some of the negative media perceptions we get about this city. And again, a challenge to you is to put in Bradford UNESCO City of Film in Google and click on a news search, and you will see predominantly really positive messages about this city, lots and lots of them, and not just in the Telegraph and Argus, who have been a great supporter, but in all kinds of press situations. And I think, that is, I think that is really what is needed sometimes. We need to remind people, certainly in the UK, but beyond that, about what an amazing place this is, really. And you know what? All of the people that come to Bradford that might have heard some negative connotations, I deal with a lot of people that come from London and further afield when they want to make films. And it doesn't take them long, before Bradford gets under their skin and they're like, wow, it's so much nicer than we thought. There's 3,000 listed buildings in the city centre alone. That's why filmmakers come. It's very hilly, as we know. You don't really want to ride a bike if you live in the centre of Bradford, because you've got to go uphill everywhere you go. But then again, that's what makes it so filmic, And then you start to look at the additional benefits of like Little Germany and Saltaire and Haworth and all these amazing places that make up Bradford district. And yeah, it's an amazing place. And for a creative person, there's a shot at every corner. Everywhere you look, there's something visual that you can portray within your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we'll move on to some of your personal sort of film choices and personal defining films, because me and Atif always talk about sort of films as a medium to connect, and your life stories, your life moments, defining times, your career, significant events can be defined by your film choices and the latest sort of film at the time at the cinemas. So it's always interesting to find out more about people's film choices and why they've defined them. So we'll kind of explore that a little bit. But before we move on to that, just to touch upon the City of Film as a title that Bradford has. Now, we've all seen the signs on the roads when you enter Bradford, City of Film, welcome to the City of Film. They've been there for years. But many people that arrive in Bradford or those certain communities may not be aware of what that actually means. And so many times when we have community events and we talk to people, introduce them to Bradford, we mention it's the City of Film. And it's kind of, I don't think the magnitude of what that means really hits home, or the reality of actually what it is. So an interesting question I get all the time is, why Bradford? Because quite naturally, if you think of cities of film, you think, Hollywood, LA, Mumbai for Bollywood, or various other cities, Cannes, Venice. Sure. Why, UNESCO's first ever City of Film? I mean, it really takes some thinking about, how did Bradford get it? Why did Bradford get it? In simple terms, really.
Okay, so the film heritage of this city goes back to the dawn of cinema. And this is pre-Hollywood, pre-Bollywood, pre-Nollywood, pre-Chollywood. Before they had even been thought of, Bradford had a small, but Bradford had a film industry. And that was linked to the textile industry. And some of the engineers at the time that were driving the mills, driving the technology behind the mills, were investing in new technology in the late 1800s, which was film. So to such a degree that when the Lumiere brothers first took their film roadshow on the road, the first city they came to outside of London was Bradford. And actually, ironically, they went to show their films at the Palace Theatre, which, if you look at the grassy mound in front of the National Science and Media Museum, that's where the Palace Theatre was. And the Lumiere brothers, for their first show outside of London, came there. We've got a poster to prove it. Actually, the film poster was printed in Bradford, because we're also quite famous for print. And there were a few businesses in Bradford that used to do all of the major printing of film posters for many years, until the digital age kind of superseded that. So if you went to a website, bradfordfilmheritage.com, you will see there an app. It's just a free website that ships to your phone or your tablet. It gives details of every film and TV location in Bradford over the last 100 years. And it links to IMDb, which is the Internet Movie Database, and it links to Google Maps as well. So it'll show you where Peaky Blinders was filmed. It'll show you where The Railway Children, The King's Speech was filmed. And so I think that's number one, is that film heritage, that link to when still photography moved into the moving image. And some of the early pioneers, you know, R.J. Appleton was a photographer from Bradford who dabbled in new technology, which was moving image. There's a really great story about him being commissioned by the Telegraph and Argus, of course, is the Bradford newspaper. But it used to be two rival newspapers, the Telegraph and the Argus. The Argus paid for Appleton to go down and film Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. And they kitted out a railway carriage so that he could develop the film on the way back. And when he got back to Bradford, this is in 1897, by the way, he got back to Bradford and he showed that film as kind of like a live newsreel. And it was amazing that 10,000 people turned out to see this thing. We didn't have tellies back then, remember? So, you know, and then you start to add to that the fact that we have got the National Science and Media Museum, which, of course, for many years was the Film and Photography and Television Museum. It was home for Europe's first ever IMAX. And you look at what we've done since we became designated as a city of film. I mean, the number of courses that you can now study at Bradford College, at the university, some of the work we've done with Bradford schools. We've now got 10 community cinemas around the Bradford district. And our ambition by 2030 is to get one in every council ward, and there's 30 of them. But that relies on volunteers, and that relies on goodwill. And some of it relies on a bit of funding, but actually I won't say it's the easiest part, but actually it's building the momentum. And we're a very small team. There's me and two part-time graduates to help with the work of the film office. I look at classic films that have been made here over the years. You know, if you go back to the Brontes and the first Wuthering Heights film that was made in 1920, it was a silent movie. You look at J.B. Priestley's Look Up and Laugh, 1935. Look at Room at the Top, the first X-rated certificate film, Room at the Top, which was shot in Bradford. It's now a 12A because, you know, it shouldn't have ever been X-rated, really. It was one of the first films to use a local dialect, Yorkshire accent, and so much so that people in London were asking for subtitles because they didn't understand what we were saying. Look at our relationship with Bollywood over the years. And, you know, in 2017, Akshay Kumar spent 3 months in Bradford filming the film Gold, which shot all over the north of England, but actually they were based in Little Germany in Bradford. And he was tweeting about his experience in Bradford. He's got 34.5 million Twitter followers, you know. And so I think the list goes on. It is hard to get that message out to everybody in Bradford because of the competing messages that we all face every day, you know, and globalization and everything else. But we try through different methods, through like we're doing this with you now on a podcast, a lot of the work we put on the big screen in City Park, some of the festivals and events that we get involved in. But yeah, I would like to think that over time, everyone that either lives or visits Bradford could experience the UNESCO City of Film in one shape or another, one form, whether you're a Bradford business that ends up renting out your warehouse as a film set, or whether you participate in the film festivals, or whether you're a young person growing up here that ends up being involved in the film literacy work. So, yeah.
Excellent. Learning a lot today.
Indeed.
I'll hand over to Atif here now to talk a bit about some of your film choices, David.
Thank you, Sohail. So, Mr. Wilson, I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask for a countdown of 5 films. We'll just take it one film at a time. So the first film, just a film which has special meaning for you, which you watch or you consistently watch, or which you enjoy.
Well, there's two actually, but I'll cover the first one off. When I was growing up, and my first exposure to Spielberg really was Jaws. And there's so many layers to that film as well. And it's still a film that, and it might sound really old-fashioned now, from the 70s, but actually the relationships, the whole, in film terms, we call it the mise en scène, which is like the setting of the film, the way that it's set, the way that it's pitched. It was a completely other world to me. For someone growing up in Bradford, to see this amazing location in the States, and that whole suspense that you get with Jaws, and the music. And it's quite disappointing when you look back on it now, and the special effects weren't that brilliant. But as a young person, of its time, people screamed in the cinema when the head falls out of the boat. And I just think it's Spielberg at his best, teasing out all of those different relationships alongside this kind of suspense horror, which, there are just so many different layers to that. And I think Jaws, if it isn't already continues to be studied as under film studies, it should be. So Jaws is one. And again, as a young person, I think I shouldn't have got to see it at the age that I did. I think I might have been 10 or 11. And I think in them days, people weren't as keen as they are now with classifications of films, and young people could sneak in to see cinema releases and things. And of course, we spoke for choice now, aren't we? Because we've got video on demand, we've got Netflix, a lot of households will have Disney Plus, and so there's so much content, more content than we could ever get through in a lifetime. When we were younger, when I was growing up, you got a blockbuster movie, once or twice a year that you might be able to afford to go see. Because we certainly, from my background and growing up in Bradford, we didn't have a lot of money to be we didn't go to the cinema every week. One of my earliest memories, actually, of going to the cinema was as a younger child, as a probably about 5 or 6, with my brother and sister on a Saturday morning to the ABC cinema that used to be on Broadway, and Laurel and Hardy films used to be on repeat. And my parents, it was called a kids club, and they used to drop us off there, go and do the shopping, and we'd watch all these black and white silent movies. And I used to love that. I used to really enjoy that. So Jaws is one. I suppose an all-time favourite really is Blade Runner. And there's something about Blade Runner that I think it's the mystique behind the locations and that whole, just the treatment of it. I was really nervous, actually, when the new Blade Runner 2049 came out, because I thought, you're never going to be able to compete with that. And actually, I think it did. I still don't think it's quite as good. But when you see the new Blade Runner on IMAX, it's immersive for me. It's immersive filmmaking, because you're kind of lost in it. It's just so well made. And those are films that I could watch time and time again.
With Jaws, I only realized how good Jaws was. I was watching at home one day with my mum, and my mum unfortunately doesn't speak English, so she's not a big fan of English movies. But I just remember her being engrossed, and I thought, and then it was it's the universal theme of the fear of water, or the fear of sharks as well. So she was just hooked until the end, and she's got a very low patience level as well. She'll get up and leave the room if she's not interested. And I think the characterization is really key as well between the three main protagonists. Is so well written. You've got Robert Shaw, you've got Roy Scheider as well, and Richard Dreyfuss as well. They're so distinct, each three of them, and their chemistry between them as well. And there's a lot of momentum in the film. I find all the great films are working towards something, and it's just, you can't take your eyes off the screen, really. So when my mum enjoyed that, I thought, no, there's something about this film. It's more than just a Hollywood film. There's something there which is universal. It is. And
Richard Dreyfuss, I mean, such an amazing talent. And one of the favourite scenes is when they're on the boat, because they don't, with no spoilers here, I'm sure most people have seen Jaws. If you haven't, get it on.
Shame on you. Watch it.
Get it and watch it. When they're comparing the scars that they've had from all the sharks that they've hunted, or they've been trying to preserve, or whatever it might be, and they get to know each other on the boat, comparing the scars, and then there's the shark attack. And it is one of those films that has got so many different levels to it. Really,
it's got difference. With Blade Runner, do you prefer the original cut, or did you like the final cut that Ridley Scott?
The director's cut.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I preferred the original cut, and I might be going against the grain really there.
Yeah. But because there's a lot of people that are not fans of the voiceover. Were you not affected by the voiceover? Is that the film that you grew up with, so you just got used to it?
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. I've seen it quite a few times, and I think that there's a distraction there with what they added and the extra scenes. And again, like I said, it comes down to personal taste, doesn't it? And what you what you become familiar with, really. And I think I was introduced to Blade Runner, you know, certainly before I don't claim myself to be a film expert now, but I certainly know a bit more about the process of making the stuff. And back then I didn't, and I just took it for what it was. And it's only when I've come to kind of study it later on and teach it, actually teach on the MA in filmmaking a little bit now at the university, that I've sometimes looked back on these things and think that's probably why I really did enjoy Jaws. And that's probably why Blade Runner is one of my kind of, it's just where it takes you, isn't it? It's where it takes you, I think, sort of mentally, where something leads you into another world for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you're transported there, and actually the experience of it. Sometimes it's not always a good experience. Sometimes you're frightened. Sometimes it's thought-provoking in sometimes a negative way, but that's what culture and creativity should be about. It should be about challenging us sometimes. And obviously sometimes it's about relaxing us and making us laugh. But that's why I think the whole genre, the art form of film, is so dynamic. And we can work with that in so many different situations. I mean, just from some of the other work that we do, before I forget, is around community cinemas and using archive film to work with people that live with dementia. And that whole reminiscence thing around, you know, this was what Bradford was like in the 1970s, using archive film to retrace people's memories. And it's phenomenal, because you can do that in a way with film that other art forms and perhaps spoken word or printed word might not do. You know,
it doesn't have the same effect, does it? Because it incorporates everything, just the visual, literature as well, the music as well. I actually used to work for Odeon Cinema, and the manager arranged a screening of the original 82 version of Blade Runner. And like you said, it's an immersive film. To watch it at home, even on a big screen, is different. But watching it in actual cinema, it was empty. It was just the stuff. It was a great experience. You just throw into that world. You think you're in Los Angeles in that year, and it's with the sound effects and the speakers. It has a drastic effect. It's like you're actually there in the actual world. So I'm sure the first. Sorry, I was going. I think go ahead. Sorry, no, beg your pardon. Go.
Well, this is the first time that I'd seen that I saw Blade Runner. What was that experience that I don't think I'd seen anything quite like it. I've never been a real sci-fi fan. I mean, I remember queuing at the Odeon in 1977 to see Star Wars. And dare I say, shoot me down, dare I say, I was a bit bored with it, to be honest. It didn't captivate me in the same way that Blade Runner did. And, you know, I know that there's lots of people who dedicate their life to the whole Star Wars saga. But for me, it wasn't, you know, that wasn't the case, really.
I'm sure it was voted the greatest sci-fi film by Total Film as well. This is going back a few years now. But,
right.
Blade Runner was one, and it was ahead of any Star Wars film or any Alien films. Anyway, moving swiftly on to your next choice.
Well, do you want my next choice? I've got to say Billy Liar, and I'll tell you why. Billy Liar was Sir Tom Courtenay. It was part of that new wave movement in the 50s and 60s. You know, Tony Richardson was a really famous film director, born in Shipley. And he directed Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, Taste of Honey. But then you came along there was new wave cinema, which usually was about angry young men wanting to change their life. A friend of mine took me to see Billy Liar at the Bradford Playhouse on Chapel Street. I was still at school at the time. And this would have been in the 1980s, when it came out. And she's going, oh, this is a film, Billy Liar. It was filmed in Bradford in 1963. And I was like, is it black and white? Well, as a young man, I'm like, why would I want to go see that? I wasn't interested. I went along and I saw it. And as soon as I saw Bradford on the screen in a cinema, I was kind of like, oh, wow, somebody made a film that's got Bradford in it. And I was genuinely kind of taken aback. And then, you know, obviously fast forward to the role that I do now. I've met Sir Tom Courtenay. I met him again on Sunday at the premiere of The Railway Children. And I've been kind of fascinated by the journey that Bradford's made on screen, you know, from the 60s right up to date. And I'll bring you on to my next choice, which is Ali and Eva by Cleo Barnard.
Wow.
Have you seen Ali and Eva?
I haven't. I must confess, it's one I've not seen yet. It slipped through the net last year, but I will definitely make an effort to catch it when it's out on DVD.
So Cleo Barnard was born in Otley, and she's an amazing writer and director. Ali and Eva is about a relationship between a white working class grandma, actually, who lives on Homewood, and an Asian landlord from BD3, and just how they just end up getting on together. They come from completely different backgrounds. They have completely different music tastes. Adil Akhtar plays Ali, and it's just, again, I mean, I say this quite a bit. I've just noticed about the layers, but that film has so many layers because the lady from Homewood has got actually Irish descent. She's got an Irish background, but she's ended up in Bradford. Adil's Pakistani background. He's ended up in Bradford as a landlord of some properties. He's got a love of sort of hip hop and techno music. She likes country music. But you know what? At the end of the day, this is just two people that collide through a series of events, and you get to see Homewood and you get to see Bradford 3. And it's just an amazing story that's got lots of Bradford references and Bradford characters. I think it's a film that could travel really well anywhere in the world. But actually, if you're from Bradford, you know about all the references that they're referring to. And it's really funny. It's laugh out loud funny. So Ali and Ava, it's on Netflix now. So it went from cinema to being on Netflix. So I would definitely recommend that. And you see my name under the special thanks in the credit right at the end. I'm right proud of that.
I'll look out for that. Thank you very much.